what our needs are. Just opening it up, this is a quote that Vince and I went to the Texas Fire Chiefs Association Executive Conference 2 weeks ago, and this is a quote that stuck with me from one of the presenters there, and it's really the purpose of what a firefighter is, and it's just everything that we do is always condensed into a critical moment in time. That's what we train and prepare for, and we're trained and prepared to aggressively search for victims and create survivable space for those that are needing us when they call upon us. So I thought that was a pretty good quote. Some of our history, if you're not aware of it, we were established December 1st, 1908. It was an all-volunteer fire department at that time. We'll jump forward to 1961, where that's the next documented bit of history that I could find. That's when the fire department was basically split into and established into two separate units by the city charter. We had the city fire department. It was headed by a captain, or as they referred to him, a drill master back then. He was the city department head, and the city's purpose was to provide equipment for volunteer firefighters to be able to do their job. The Volunteer Fire Department was established. This was later to become King and Volunteer Fire Department Incorporated, which was a true nonprofit organization. It was headed by the Volunteer Fire Chief. So actually you had your city department head was a captain, and the head of the Volunteer Fire Department was the fire chief. They worked together to create training and work in harmony and everything like that. The Volunteer Fire Department's purpose was to provide manpower for responses, and the Volunteer Fire Department was funded receiving $1 per member for training that each member attended or call that they attended. We're going to jump ahead to 1986. That's when I came on board as a dorm student over at the fire department. Our paid staff consisted of a deputy fire chief, which was Chief Joe Rice, and one firefighter at that time. Our average membership volume, 35 to 40 full volunteer members or full members, and then up to 10 recruits. The recruits are the ones that are in training and preparing to take the next step as a firefighter. That recruit training generally was 1 year, back then 12 months. And then if there was space on the full membership side, they were allowed to come in as a full member. Many of these members had to at times wait up an extra year or so before a space was made available for them by retirement or resignation, whatever the case was, before they became a full member. So you can see at that time, basically our authorized strength was 40 full members, as well as 10 recruits for up to 50 members at the time. Our membership was divided into 5 response companies back then. We had one company for all the chief officers. The chief officers were paged every time a company was paged for a fire call in order to get a chief officer there. And then we had 4 companies of firefighters. Our annual calls for service, 350 to 400. I remember that specifically because the year that we hit that average of 1 call a day, we thought we had made it big time back then. That was a busy year. Firefighter certification took about 3 years for a new member to come in and get. That was conducted during Wednesday evening drills. And we'll contrast all this with how we're doing things now. A company remained on call until the next page response. What that means is the company could stay up for a week or 2 weeks at a time being on call for that amount of time, and then when the next company call came in, they were rotated out. The problem with that was that there were even days when you might start on call that day and been up on call for 2 weeks thinking, okay, my company's been called, I'm off the hook for a while. The amount of calls that came in, you might be back on call again by that evening. So we responded to a limited number of emergency medical incidents back in the mid-'80s, mainly reported heart attacks or calls where CPR was in progress, that the ambulance was going to need that extra help. In addition to, we ran the second out ambulance as fire department members back when King and EMS was a private company before Palliser Hospital took over. Some of our hiring history: in 1989, a second full-time firefighter position was approved and hired. In 1992, we hired a full-time administrative assistant. That was Gina. She's still with us. 2006, we got our 3rd firefighter position approved and hired, and then this past year we had our 4th full-time firefighter position approved and hired. Back in 2014, the Canyon Volunteer Fire Department Incorporated was abolished as it stood then. If you'll remember, we had the city fire department and the volunteer fire department. And as we progressed through the years, call volumes increased. It just became kind of cluttered on who was responsible for what. Chief Mike Webb was the fire chief at this point. I was the volunteer fire chief at that point. And we started talking about it and talked amongst the members of the volunteer fire department. And we decided to abolish the volunteer fire department. And now all the volunteer members, instead of volunteering for the Volunteer Fire Department Incorporated, now volunteer directly for the City of King. All the funds were transferred from the Volunteer Fire Department into the newly formed Canyon Firefighters Association. It's still, the current funding is $3 per member for call or training. If you remember back to '61, it was $1. We're up to $3 now, which does help funding with the Firefighters Association. Purposes of the Firefighters Association is to support the fire prevention, fire protection, training, and member recruitment activities of the fire department. Support the Fire Explorers program for the Canyon Fire Department, which the Explorers program is currently not active, thank you. Just due to, once again, the extra time it takes for someone to take that over. Yes.
The $3 a member, is that paid by the City of King?
Yes, that's budgeted.
Budgeted in the City of King.
Yes. And
I'm sorry, based on the history of number of calls or history of training or both?
just the number of calls.
Okay.
Like, say you have 10 members respond, that'd be $30 for that call.
Okay.
Association gets.
How about the training?
Training, if, once again, if we have 10 members of training that night, that'd be $30.
Thank you.
The other function of this Firefighter Association is to create a social recreational fellowship. It's very important in a volunteer organization to include the families. We're calling the members at all times of the night, weekend, whatever, and by giving this social aspect, where we might just get together and eat burgers out at the park and let the kids play, sit out under the trees, whatever it is. The Firefighters Association helps fund those type of activities as well.
So, I'm gonna interject here to clear some of what your question was. That's what that $3 per member, that also goes to is to fund those kind of activities, as well as, how about equipment and things of that such.
And some of where that funding came from, I'm back in my earlier days of being here. It's my understanding that volunteer firefighters were originally comped for their water, sewer, and trash services here in the City of King. At some point along the way, it was determined that the city could no longer compensate someone for those services. So in order to kind of stay along with that, a fund was developed per call for training, and at the end of the year, that water, what we call the water fund, back then we got a check in December, and the membership, if we were in good standing with the association rules as a member, we were basically reimbursed for what the average household in the City of Canyon utilities were for that year.
So we're not doing that anymore?
No, sir.
Is that a rule we can't do it?
What's that?
What are you just saying about the city bills to volunteers?
It used to be back in the day, Chuck, they would allow volunteer firefighters to be compensated by waiving all their fees associated with water and sewer. So I believe.
So is that allowable now? I mean,
That's-
what?
That was done away with several years ago due to us not kind of like a.
Just have to do something with natural resources.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that's exactly written, but I know because city managers used to have the same kind of deal in their contract, and nobody does that anymore. I'm not sure where that came about specifically, but that kind of got done away
Well,
with.
commissioners used to, from what I understand,
Probably,
too, or water
yeah.
bills were paid for. I mean, I would love to put some things like that on the table and all, if,
That's why I
if we had
questioned, is
some
that legal
options.
or?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, not to jump ahead, but we have developed other things, and it's in a slide about VIP points and compensation. So it's still in there. It's just not the one lump sum at the end of the year type deal anymore. So it's not that we've taken that away. It's just been revised.
Is this pretty typical for volunteer fire departments?
What's that?
The $3?
No, in fact,
Or is that just something we came up with?
that's something the City of Canyon does, and the volunteers, back in the Volunteer Fire Department Incorporated days, and even now with our association, we're very blessed to have that type of funding. Because many volunteer fire departments, they have to go out and seek community events, pancake feeds, you know, hamburger feeds, whatever, and get out. We've been very blessed by that type of financial support from the city, and we do not have to do a lot of fundraising like that.
If I may, I believe the paying of the water bills is kind of a misappropriation of government funds, because that's basically a tax that we were paying for somebody. I think it revolved around that, not 100% sure, but it was something.
You know, I get that for commissioners, I don't get that as much for somebody that's providing fire protection for the city.
Right.
You know, I'll have to go back and look at the memos. Mike Kelly and I talked about that, and we did some research on it and wrote a memo on that. I'll need to go back and look at that, because we dealt with that at one time.
Clearly, it was a statewide legal issue.
Yeah.
We cannot do it.
Yeah, it has to be.
There's no doubt.
Right. But y'all, we have people that are members of the Canyon Firefighter Association that don't live inside the city.
Correct.
They wouldn't get that benefit.
So jumping ahead to today, currently our paid staff is one fire chief, one administrative assistant, a captain, 4 firefighters. One of those firefighters, Dan Root, he is assigned actually as a captain on the fire department. Then we have 4 part-time maintenance technicians. Our maintenance technicians help us with anything from paperwork is assigned, you know, administrative duties. Dave Hoff is a great asset. He's retired from Colorado as a firefighter, 30-some years in the fire service. He's a wealth of information, helps us a lot with our training. We have another 3 part-time maintenance technicians we have. They're full-time Emerald Fire Department firefighters, but they do part-time work for us and help us keep trucks up, you know, cleanliness around the station, whatever we need to do. The side benefit of that is they're also volunteer firefighters, so if a call does come in while they're with us, it helps us out on staffing when they're there. We currently have 27 volunteer members on the roster. Deputy Chief, that's Wally Hart. We have a captain, 3 lieutenants. One of the lieutenants, I have a pending resignation from him. Why? Not enough time to serve. 16 firefighters on the list right now. 3 pending resignations are possible. That's just due to not meeting minimum participation requirements. The majority of those firefighters are EMS certified. We have 2 support staff. Dave Hoff is one of those. Former Chief Mike Webb is another support staff. He decided to stay on as a member, and he's helping us with some driver operator training right now. We do currently have 4 recruits on the list this year, with their Firefighter 1 training to be completed sometime late in June. So statistics show on recruits, just from my experience, we'll lose 2/3 of those by the end of their 2nd year, because they find out what time commitment it takes. And it's pretty sad, especially after they've completed their recruit training and put all that time into it. We're currently divided into 3 on-call companies now. If you remember, back in the day, as our younger guys always say, hey, back in the day. But back in the day, we had 5 companies. We're down to 3 now. We're on a rotating on-call schedule. It's called the Kelly schedule. It's the same work schedule like Amarillo or Pantex Fire Department uses, where in the evenings on weekends we're on call every other day during a 5-day span. Then we get 4 days off of being on call. The plus is it allows members to know what their on-call schedule is going to be when we're expecting them to be available up to a year in advance. We still encourage our members, if you're not on call and you're available, please respond. We can use you.
How long have y'all been on that schedule?
When did we start that?
I'm gonna guess probably 2 years now.
Day staff exception on that is if the day staff are not on call, they get a special call back because overtime costs kick in anytime they come back. Like last year, we had 1,328 calls for service. That's the most that we've ever had. Of those 1,328, 465 were fire-related incidents. 863 were emergency medical or rescue incidents. Not only the EMS calls, those rescues, that includes any car wrecks that we might respond to, any search and rescue calls that we get out to Powder Canyon, which can keep us pretty busy in the summer months. That's included in those rescues. Currently, this year, we're at 434. and that was as of 11 o'clock this morning. We're averaging about 4 calls a day. We're on track to exceed last year's calls if we keep this up right now. So what do we do? What services does your fire department provide? EMS, first responder for EMS incidents. King Fire Department is a Department of State Health Services advanced life support first responder organization. That means that we do have some paramedics and advanced EMTs that can utilize their advanced skills out helping people that need that. We help EMS with their incidents that have possibility of life-threatening conditions, or there are predetermined types of calls that we know from past history that they may need some assistance with patient care on. When EMS may not be available, they're on a transport from Canyon to the hospital or on the way back, and another call comes in where the actual first responder will go out there and make initial patient contact and begin treatment, care, and assessment, and preparing them for transport if needed. We do rescue incidents, our motor vehicle accidents, technical rescue team. We do some confined space rescue. Our fire prevention activities, inspection, education, investigations. We even assist citizens with smoke detector batteries or smoke alarm battery changes when they call and request that as well. This is an area that we're lacking in a little bit. I foresee that in order for us to get where we need with our fire prevention activities down the road, we're going to need a full-time fire marshal that'll take over these activities right here. We have a community wildfire prevention program. Dennis is heading that up right now. We're currently working on an MOU with Texas A&M Forest Service where they can come into the city limits and help us with our CWPP. Some of the mitigation activities, there's a lot of planning that goes on around that. It might be a mechanical abatement before we go in and do some actual mechanical thinning, tree cutting, etc. in these areas, or it might be that we do prescribed burns. Hazardous materials, we're initial response for hazardous materials incidents. If it turns into something on the larger scale, we have our regional hazmat team out of Emerald Fire Department that performs the regional hazmat duties for this area. We run high water responses, flash flooding events, stranded motorists. We have the vehicles that we can get out in those higher water situations and get people out of harm's way when needed. Conduct weather watch operations, coordinate that with Emerald Emergency Management, and we maintain the city outdoor warning siren system, which we were working on getting updated right now. Incident reports every day, ongoing. Daily equipment inventory of apparatus. Our firefighters that are on duty and our full-time guys, they're required to do a daily check of their personal protective equipment and their SCBA that they're assigned on that day. Building maintenance and cleaning, vehicle maintenance and cleaning. We do in-service training during the week when we have time. I'm hoping to get more and more into being able to have a regular in-service training day. It might just be a couple hours that day, it might be a half a day. We'll see how that works out. Then we conduct our weekly membership training on Wednesday evenings, second and third Wednesday, night of the months. We'll maintain the drill flow. We have our daily administrative duties we have to do, and then on top of all that, yes, we still respond to fire calls. So what has changed? This is our population growth for a 10-year span. I believe that is, yes, 2010 through 2020. As you can see, 13,303 10 years ago, and we're up to 16,316 now. So that's one thing's changing.
22.6% increase in population over 10 years.
That's one thing that's changed that affects some of the things that we do. Just basically our members that are available to respond. Here's some examples, and I want to preface this by saying I'm not knocking or demeaning our volunteer response in any way. They provide a very valuable service. Our vision does not include getting rid of volunteers. Our vision includes becoming a true combination fire department of paid staff and volunteer staff. But here's a weekday county structure fires, reported a fire in the attic, 10:15 in the morning. We responded with 4 members, all-day staff, no volunteer response. They're at work, we get it. Possible structure fire in the city. This was at 9 o'clock in the morning. Actually got 3 members, all-day staff, full-time firefighters. That was our response to on the engine and myself in the command unit. It's not a very good feeling, but fortunately we rolled up and that was a heating and air problem with the heating and air unit that smoked the residents up. This was a fire at 3:35 in the morning here in town. Initial report, I will say that our initial report, we're very fortunate. Captain Tony Robinson lived right across the street from this incident, so he got up and got on his radio and gave us a very good size up. We knew what we were coming into. 2 vehicles fully involved. Fire spreading to a 2-story triplex resident. Second exposure of a single-story residence that was to the east of the fire. It was unknown at that time if all the occupants were out of the structure. That time of the day, that's a very nerve-wracking type of call because you do not know, where are all the people? And the more people that are not out, the more manpower you need to possibly deal with that situation. So we had Captain Robinson on the scene. I pulled up myself in Unit 1. Engine 2 came in with 1 full-time, 1 volunteer. Truck 1 came in with 2 full-time and 2 volunteers. Unit 5 showed up after that with 1 full-time. Ladder 1, this is a perfect instance when that ladder truck should have rolled out the door. Due to lack of staffing, Ladder 1 didn't even roll out the door. And then I had dispatcher at the station, which is 1 volunteer member. So you can see what type of response. That's 3:35 in the morning. The majority of our members were probably home. And last one was a county residential fire alarm. I'll preface this by saying fire alarm system activations should be responded to as a reported structure fire until we prove them otherwise, because that's what that alarm system is there for. It's 10 p.m. on a weeknight. Engine 1 rolled out with 1 full-time, 1 volunteer. Truck 1 rolled out with 2 full-time members. Our normal minimum staffing is 3 firefighters for that truck to roll, but we could see through the online app that we use there were no other members coming down, so they made the decision to roll out. Our water supply, tanker 1, tanker 4, no response. Fortunately, we got disregarded about 3 minutes into this call. The occupants called and said everything was okay, so we turned around and came home. Just to give you a little sampling of some of our responses. Volunteerism is declining, not just here. This is a nationwide issue. It's not just the fire service. Many of y'all involved in civic organizations, and I don't know if y'all have trouble getting volunteers to sign up, commit, whatever, but volunteerism is declining. Nationwide in the fire service, 23% decline in the firefighters since 1983 through 2017. That's from the National Volunteer Fire Council. Here in Texas, we've experienced a 10 to 15% decline in volunteer firefighter membership. That's over the past decade through the State Firemen's Fire Marshal Association. Why? Dual income households are the norm anymore. Their careers are already competing with available family time or their free time that they have. There are many more extracurricular activities with children. This is something that we hear a lot of times. Kids got baseball, not going to be able to make it. We have soccer, we have basketball, whatever it is. Occupies a lot of their available time that they have to volunteer. Our tenure members are leaving. They're retiring out. The retirements bring about a very large loss of experience, years of service, and we've experienced that over the past years. Our younger members on the fire department seem to be more portable than people used to be. With their careers, and they tend not to stay around. Basically, a younger member just getting started is offered another 50 to 75 cents an hour more in a neighboring town. Guess where they're going to go to work at? They're going to jump over there because they can make more money. When I first got on, the majority of our members were tied to the community. They were self-employed here in the community, able to shut their businesses down and go serve their community. And once that was over with, they'd go back, open their offices back up, and get back to work. The ones that were not self-employed, majority of them worked for employers that allowed them to leave work and go serve the community and go back to work after they got back. We just don't see that anymore. Of our current 27 volunteer firefighters, only 7 have full-time employment here in the city. Of those 7 that work here in the city, they have a limited availability during the day. Once again, just the climate that we live in and work climate, the employers are just not allowing them to leave as easily as they used to. Once mentioned earlier that training used to be on the job, it was learn as you go. We've had to get away from that. Past liability situations where inadequate training was one of the leading causes of serious injury or death on the fire scene. You see that's a big liability issue, so we want to make sure they're trained now before we cut them out loose and get them out ready to go. Our current cadets, they will invest over 200 hours of time in their initial training for Firefighter 1. That's through an online curriculum and in-person skills training. After they get through at that, they'll have to go through the Wildfire firefighter training, which is also online and hands-on skills. So the things we've tried to do at the fire department to help retain our trained certified volunteer members, we've reduced the minimum participation requirements. Originally, you had to attend 60% of offered trainings and make 40% of your required company responses to maintain membership. Over the years, we have dropped that down to 50% of the training. Training is still very high. Number one, not only because it's required by the retirement system that volunteers participate in, it's just a very, very important component of volunteer member service. But we've dropped down on those required responses to 25%. And this is all in line with what the retirement system requires for a year's service of credit in the retirement system. These lower participation requirements, they have decreased the stress somewhat on volunteer members of excessive calls. It's decreased the number of responses, of course, they need to maintain good standing. However, the lower standards equal lower response levels. If a member is not meeting minimum requirements, they are placed on probation for a 3-month or 1/4 of the year period, and then they're allowed that next 3 months to bring their participation requirements back up to where they need to be. Sadly, if they're not, I told you I have 3 pending firefighter resignations right now. On the volunteer side, it's because of their participation. I believe the city has a vested interest in these members. The city pays for workman's compensation. They pay for the cost of outfitting the firefighter in protective gear. The walkie-talkies we carry alone are pushing $8,000 a piece. That's per member. So the city has all this investment in these members. They need to get an investment on their return, or return on their investment. So that's one of the reasons we track this very closely. We used to be under a 12-month evaluation period, but we've gone back to a 3-month evaluation period, simply because a member could come in and basically within the first month or 2 of the year, they could participate heavily enough that could pretty much carry them through the rest of the year. We might not see them again, so that's why we've gone to a 3-month evaluation period. Other things we've done, 8 to 5, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays. We've changed all of our incidents to what we call a one-truck call. A one-truck call does not count against a member if they miss it, but they get credit if they do make it. These were previously an actual company call, and if a volunteer was at work, they missed it. So we tried to adjust that a little bit to help us out to retain these members as well. If they do miss a required response, we give them several ways to come back in and have a catch-up provision for their missed calls. If they come in and help a staff for 2 hours a day, they get 1 call credit. So if they're here for an 8-hour day, which I have some guys working an 8-hour day, they're volunteer members today, they will get 4 call credits just for being here today, helping us out. And you get a call credit for making calls during your unassigned company calls. So if it's not your company on call and another company gets paid, you come in to help the other company out, and you're still getting full credit for it. Once again, attending these one-truck calls that don't go against them, but if they make them, we give them credit for that. If you're EMS certified and approved to, you're an approved response driving person, we keep you an on-call vehicle to take home at night, sit at your house, and then if we get an EMS call, they respond from their house to that EMS incident. So they're getting extra credit by doing that as well.
How many do you have doing that?
We have about a half a dozen probably right now that.
I would say 3 to 4 on a consistent basis.
A couple more that from time to time they'll themselves. And kind of in conjunction with what we were talking about earlier on the compensation for utilities and everything, we have what we call a volunteer incentive program. The participation in this program is voluntary. We do have a member or two that have decided not to participate in this. One, because they may not feel like they ought to be taking money for being a volunteer. That's not what they got in for. Another one maybe for tax credit reasons or whatever. It's up to them whether they want to participate in it or not. But they accrue points for everything that they do. For each call they make, they get 1 point. For every training event, they get 3 points. Special events or public relation events, we give them 2 points per hour that they come in to staff with that. Or staffing assistants at the station, they get 1 point per hour. So, what does this volunteer incentive program do? And how does it work? At the end of the quarter, we add up all the points that have been accrued by all members. And we take that number of points and divide it into the funds that we have available to pay out for that quarter to assign a point value. And then we come back in, and if they have met their minimum participation in training requirements, they basically get paid up to $750 for that quarter. Originally that was $500 a quarter, and we bumped that up to $750 this past
Which
year.
all goes back to your first question, the $600 a year that they used to get. This is kind of what's replaced.
Is the city funding that?
Yes.
The city's funding this. It all comes out of that.
Yes. It comes out of the city budget on that. We set aside a certain amount every quarter to pay out, and that's how we.
We've been doing it a long time.
Yes. Previously, it wasn't point based. It was based on, there were I think 3 or 4 different levels. If you made a certain percent of calls, kind of depended on the more calls you made, the more you got paid. But we switched over to this point based system because it actually it's up to the member. If they want to max out, on the volunteer incentive payment, they come in, they put the time in and all the activities, they'll get that. Those that make their participation requirements but don't do a lot extra, they don't get a whole lot. I've had members say, well, why is my payment so low? It's a reflection of how much you participate. Beginning this year, back in January, we started staffing Saturdays and Sundays. So the fire department is now staffed 7 days a week, 8 to 5. What we got to talking about amongst the full-time staff, there were 2 of us on the full-time staff, either on call Saturdays or Sundays. And if you're on call, your day's pretty much shot at the house anyway on the fire department, just due to the amount of times we get called out, or possibility to get called out. So we decided that if that Saturday or Sunday was our on-call day, we're just going to work the 8 hours, be there at the station. One thing, it decreased our response times because we had people at the station. And what we do is we flex those hours off during the week at some point so that we're not incurring overtime. By opening up on Saturdays and Sundays, it's created a new opportunity for volunteers to come in and staff. Before, Saturdays and Sundays, the station was pretty much closed unless we had calls going on. So they can come in and staff, help out with those calls they've missed. They can increase their volunteer incentive payment. We even have times that if they happen to miss training the previous week, we'll go over the training topic, and so they can come in and catch up on that training topic. We've had mixed results on this. We have some Saturdays and Sundays. We have up to 4, maybe 5 volunteer members coming in. Sometimes it's just the 2 of us that are on the paid staff that come in. So where do we need to be? I have to use the NFPA standard 1720 which is a guide that basically, a department as ours, a combination volunteer paid department, is looked at. This guide says that on an initial typical single-family residence response, the Canyon Fire Department should have 10 on scene to begin with. That's not calling in a second alarm or calling in mutual aid. That is what we need to be providing on that initial response. On a good day, I can get 6 full-time members there. That's when we're all staff, no one's flexing off. As you know, think back to the Saturdays and Sundays, generally someone is flexing off during the week. So 6 is a good day. More than likely we're going to have 5 on a good day. During the daytime, on average, we're getting about 2 volunteer members. If it is a significant structure fire, and they can break away. Evening and weekends, a lot of times the average is 4 full-time members. The 2 that are on call, and let's just say it's a good day again, I have 2 off call that are available to come in. The other 2, they're trying to maintain a work-life balance, and they're either out with family or friends up in Amarillo doing whatever they do when they're not on call. And on average, 4 volunteer members for a single-family residence style fire.
Yep. So one thing that, your tax dollars does get you investment, it gets you a decrease in your insurance premiums. And so insurance services offices is basically kind of the standard. Most insurance companies use this standardization to allocate their premiums based on community by community. And so it's a scale of 1 to 10. The PPC, the Public Protection Classification, is determined by many areas, and I'm going to go over those here in a second. Just so you know, going into this, we're number 2. So the lower the number, the better. Number 1's the best. And so we are a 2 here in Canyon. The worst it is, you can have a 10 or you can have a no rating. So that's as worst as you can. I'll go through some figures, but the fire department is a big chunk of this, along with several other ones. But like I said, this is what most people use in calculating insurance premiums. So y'all's insurance carrier providers, like Texas Farm Bureau, they're using this system. So I don't know of any insurance providers that don't use this system. And so this is how they come up with your premium being high or low. First one, emergency communication system, 10 points for it. It's a 1 to 99 scale point system. And so emergency communications, all that goes through Reynolds County. Fire department is 50 points of the total classifications. So let me go to the point scales here. There's the point scales, you guys. For 1, you got to have 90 or more. For 10, 0 to 9.99. So those are the point scales. So you can picture that as we go through these slides. Fire department is 50 total points, and you can see it's broke down with first response, training, equipment, apparatuses, pretty much everything under the sun in there. So it's a big chunk. It's 50 points. So it's one that definitely needs to be invested so we can continue to keep our insurance premiums low. Another one, we have an excellent water system. It's the other big one. The water supply and the fire department are the 2 main pieces of this. And that all goes back to hydrants and fire safety out there. And so it's 40 points total classification. So that all goes to the adequacy to suppress. I would say probably into that, Dennis, is that where sprinkler system comes in, probably with building codes? Or that mitigation?
That'll come into the codes here in just a little bit. But the water spot is definitely there to support that.
And y'all flow test once a year, right?
Yes.
Yep. So that's part of that requirement.
And that's done now. It used to be that was another project that the fire department would do with the limited staff we have. For the past several years, I'm going to say 6 years or so, it's done third party, so we have that independently tested, and that's helped our ISO on that. It's required.
Community risk mitigation, this is hazard mitigation, which we're going to talk about tonight, the hazard mitigation plan. So like Chief Quinn talked about, doing the prescribed burns and stuff, that's what this is. Firewise goes in here, for those that are part of that. It's kind of an extra point, it's a 5.5, it's just some rounding points. Here's the code aspect. So this goes back into the investigations, in the building codes where, we have a certain building, you have to require fire suppression. Well, this is where it comes out of, the need for that. in that aspect. We have to be doing that for the PPC standards, for the ISO standards. So construction codes, fire safety codes, all the stuff we're doing right now. So here's countrywide, how we compare. We are right here. So you can see we're on the front end, which is excellent. But you can see, I think there's 40,000 on that. So that's United States. So we're one of the 1,772. Here's Texas. We're in the class 2 right there at 312. Amarillo is a class 1, so they're one of those 69. I don't know of any other ones in this region. Dennis, do you?
Love it.
Maybe love it.
For most larger cities, ones or
They're pretty
twos at
high.
least.
Yeah. The average is 4, 5, and 6, Gary, as you can see, pretty much there. But on average across the country, they're 4, 5, and 6. But I would say yes, most cities are probably large cities. Here's the insurance premium. This is a great spreadsheet. So the top line, you guys, is your home value. And so let's say I have a $250,000 house. We're a class 10, if we were a class 10 rating, I'm paying $2,341 in insurance. However, if I get down to class 5, $976. Just so you know, this is where you can tout your head, say, hey, your investment of city taxes, this is what it's getting you. It's lowering your insurance premiums, and it's right there. So, I mean, that's a big jump from $2341 down to $976.
And how much, rough idea, to go to 2? What?
Well, so there's 2 categories to that. So there's commercial businesses and then there's home residentials. The max you can get on home residential is 5. So there is no more. So 4, 3, 2, and 1. Only savings is on the commercial side. So for commercial properties, that's where they have savings. And I couldn't find a commercial chart, you guys, because I know the home one's so important. I tried to find it, but yeah, it maxes at the level 5. Anything less than that is just gravy for our commercial businesses here in town. And so I think if we jump from a 2 to a 1, you're going to lower their insurance premiums by 2%, 2 to 3%. If we go from 2 to 1. So, but that's a big thing, though. We have a lot of commercial business here in town, and their property taxes, and for our fire department, our water system, and all those factors I went through, is getting them their premiums a lot less. So, but this one's just housing. Pretty much what I said. Homeowners valued $100,000. Save $433 between 9 to a 5. That's a big savings. There's that scale again. So we're right there at 2. We're between 80 to 89.99. The hard part, you guys, that's happening more and more. The insurance company, just like everybody else, has lobbyists. And so being that we're so good, they're pushing back on us to have assessments a lot more frequently. I promise you, if you're a rated 9 or 10, they don't care because you're maxed out premiums. But because our premiums are so low, because we've done such a great job, they're trying to come back, and they've already hit Dennis up a few times to do a new assessment on the ISO rating. And so we're pushing them off right now. We'll eventually have to do one, but they're getting more aggressive on the ISO ratings. If you're a lower city, if you're under 4, you're getting hit up at least every other year.
So,
And, excuse me.
No,
But
go ahead.
but that really equates to what they're paying city taxes on the house.
Yes.
They're 44 cents a hundred on a $100,000 house. That's $440. Does that sound right? So
Pretty close.
that savings is about the same amount as what they pay on taxes.
If you got to that one.
If you got all the way to it.
Yeah. We were in that bad of shape. That's what your tax lawyers get you.
So down to why we're here today. After all that other information, just kind of give you a background on where we've been, where we are now. We determined we need 6 more firefighters right now. That's not the ending, that's the beginning. Why 6? Number 1, gives us two more more firefighters for each shift that we have. We're divided into 3 shifts. Keep those shifts even for after-hours callback, as well as holiday callback. Right now, we're not staffing holidays. We do try to observe those holidays when the pager lets us. Multiples of 3, like I said, keeps us equal in staffing. Increases our staffing to cover during times of vacation, sick leave, training. I have 2 guys in the Metroplex right now in training until they'll be back Thursday. And that's full-time guys. So you can see what our staffing is looking at now over there. Fortunately, we do have a couple volunteers that stepped up and are helping the staff. And be able to eventually create an evening shift here. And much like what the PD runs 7A to 3P, then 3P to 11P, extends our hours of coverage. Not only is that good for response times, it's given our volunteer members, once again, more access to staff time that they can come in and help with staffing, increasing those call percentages, volunteer incentive payment, whatever is motivating them to get there. This right here, looking at the basically the bottom 3 columns, this is on average for 2020, I believe, Vince.
Yeah, this report from 2020.
Number of calls per day of the week. As you can see, it's pretty even across the board. It doesn't depend on, or it doesn't matter if it's Sunday, Saturday, Monday. Emergency when they're going to come in. So you can see Sunday through Saturday, we are pretty even across the board on our average number of calls on those days. And why are we looking at 7 in the morning to 11 p.m.? Next slide. As you can see, 7 p.m. column right here. I'll point this out.
7 a.m.
Or 7 a.m. Excuse me. 7 a.m. starts here. 11 right here, or up to 11 right here. You can see the call volume curve. That is when we're getting the majority of our calls, and this is based on 2020 calls as well. And if you look throughout other years, you're going to see about the same curve on that graph. So at 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., that's covering the majority of our calls with staff at the station for now.
Do you have a breakdown of what the calls are?
I can.
We can, and it goes into types of fires, whether it's a cooking fire or a grass fire, or so yeah, it's we can get you all those reports. Are pretty. There's a lot of numbers and stuff in them, but it's if you would like one, we can sure get it for you.
A very good reporting system that we've been using for about 2 years now.
Paul, would you like some of those details?
Well, I don't know, whatever you
Okay. Anybody else want to see?
Just let us know. So just kind of give you a comparison of us here in Canyon versus some of the other near comparable population cities and towns. We'll start off with Perryton. They have the smaller population of just over 9,200. They have 10 full-time firefighters. They're a combination department that's authorized up to 20 volunteer members. They did not report their calls for service. Dumas at 1,422 on their 1,422 on their population back in 2019. They had 1,001 calls for service. They're also a combination fire department with 16 full-time and up to 30 volunteers when they're at full staffing. And I do not know what Perryton and Dumas did not call their chiefs to see what their volunteer staffing was. That's just their authorized strength. Jump over to Borger. They're a full-time fire department. They have staff 24/7. Their population 12,698. They had 1,650 calls for service, and they have 25 full-time staffing. Pampa, you can see there, 1,781 calls for service with a full-time staff of 26. Randall County Fire Department, their estimated population of the area they serve, that might be up a little bit now, around 15,000. They're at 24. They are still a combination department, and the last, just off the top of my head, probably around a dozen volunteer members. But their staffing is at 24, and then here we are at Canyon, 1,328 calls, and we're running with a full-time staff of 6 at this time.
The Perryton and Dumas, those houses they're manned 24 hours, so they're 24-hour stations.
Yes.
Where us and Randall County were not. Randall County, I think, was running a 12-hour shift.
Yes.
And we're still doing the 8-hour shift.
Unless I've changed in the last week or two.
Why do you think the difference in the calls for service? Why, Dumas at 1,000, and close same population, Border, Pampa, way higher? What are doing different things in the fire departments? Why would that be that much different? So,
Borger has a large industrial area. I don't know if that comes into play on their calls for service.
Not as much as you'd think.
Okay.
Because Philadelphia's their own fire department.
Okay. I could not answer that, Mayor.
I'm just curious, I mean, that's quite a bit of difference there. for
Well,
similar
you know, if you
populations and all
go
that.
back and dig
Wonder-
deep into, it's probably demographics of the areas and just things like that.
Well, they're probably reporting things different.
And these
You
are
don't think
major.
they're answering different calls?
These are
types
major,
of calls, or-
major towns in the
I would
counties.
bet that they're using calls as like initiated calls too, so like if they go to the school and do something.
Right. And that's something we don't include in our numbers, all the inspections and processes that I.
So they're probably pulling numbers for just about everything. Which doesn't negate the fact that that doesn't negate their numbers.
But you gotta remember, Border is the biggest town in Hutchinson County. Pampa is the biggest town in Gray County. Dumas is the biggest town in Moore County. So those are the regional hubs too. There's something for that too. So I ran some rough population estimates, and I'll call it rough. And so I based this on that 22.6%. That's about a 2.6% growth per year. Actually, Paul and I were talking about this the other day, the percentage growth. And so I basically calculated, this is all Texas demographer, so this is a 2.6% growth to the 2030. So by 2030, Canyon, at this current rate, will be at 21,000.
And I want to throw it in there, it's not numbers, but we gotta, account for when WT's in session too. That's another 8,000 to 10,000 people that we can add on top of that. So those are good numbers, but we're actually dealing with more people on a regular basis.
And Outer Canyon. So, but those are some rough estimates I wrote. And I can send this to you guys, but it's all done on exfoliation of just a 2.26%. So I just thought, I thought it pretty fascinating.
So we get compensated from the county, some of the taxes we're already paying, but we get compensated from the county for fires. What about Powder Canyon? Do we get compensation
That's
at all?
included in the county calls.
Those are part of the county?
Yes.
We're getting 200,000 a year, I think.
Yes.
It's retroactive.
Yeah. Basically remember, the amount of calls we make out into the county contract area the previous year determines what our next year's payment's going to be, so it's kind of hanging behind.
By chance, do you know the percentage of calls?
Out in the county? That was in our annual report, and I did not bring that with me.
Ballpark?
Help me out.
I don't even want to begin to.
I can get that
Yeah,
information.
it's not as much as you'd think it would be.
So it's
You'll make a look at
20%.
your report.
It's okay, it's not.
When was that?
It was the last,
What meeting?
yeah, it was 2 meetings ago. I'll pull it up here in a second.
Do you have any information on our retirement plan for the volunteers?
As far as,
How it works?
right now, I believe it's $150 per month per member, and that's the contribution, and 15 years is full vesting. And I believe for every year after that, it's compounded by 6%, based on how much you have in there. And that comes up what you'll get paid out should you get to that full vesting years of service.
So the $150 a month is paid by
The city.
The city.
That's it.
So that's 15-year limit. Where's this money being held at the DM?
It's the Texas Emergency Services Retirement System.
Yeah, it's their own retirement system.
So how much difference does that make to the volunteer firefighters and all? Is that big
Retirement?
or not?
Very little.
Mayor,
Tenure.
back in the day, it was really a
Yes.
big deal. But like you said, the younger we get, the more portable they are, and they're not staying for the 15 years. We might get 5 to 7 years out of a fireman. nowadays, as to where, you know, you don't have the Wick brothers and Wiley and people who've been on here for 20, 30 years. You know, when I come on 20 years ago, I think out of that group, Stephen Canado was the only one left in that deal that at the 20-year mark. So you're not getting a stay. So actually, it's not as much of a benefit as it was. Now, if we told Wiley and Stephen and some of those guys that, hey, we're going to stop that, you know, it would affect them, but it really wouldn't have a major impact.
My question point would be like $150 a month, probably equate maybe $700-800 a month on retirement pay to them.
Yes, I'd say that after 15 years, you're probably looking at $700-800 benefit per month.
My point would be that 150 ain't ever changed over all this period of time, but maybe if we raised our investment, it might be more incentive where
That
retirement's
actually-
going to $2,000 a month.
Yes, we have increased it.
I was going to say, over the years, that has actually increased. I think back when I started, it was less than $80 a
Yeah,
month.
I mean, that's not much of an increase. I'm just saying, if you got retirement up to a higher number for the volunteers, it might be more of an incentive for them to stay or come. It's just a question more than.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And it's, you would think that, but over the years, and just by looking at what we've had come through, and you ask some of the younger people on the department about the retirement and stuff, and they don't seem to have any interest in it. They want the money now. They'd rather have the VIP incentive points and that money now instead of the long-term retirement at the end.
But there's many of them that don't even know how much money's in there. We try to remind them of that, but I'm sure it hadn't been that. Thinking about retirement, now I'm looking at, I'm glad that, you know, I had that retirement, so.
Just off the top of your head, if you were gonna make a guess, without surveying everybody, how many people are there has anything to do with financial compensation?
They're there for that purpose.
20 years ago, I would have told you that not many. Today's times, I don't want to step out on this limb, but I'm going to say half.
You think that many?
I do think there are interested in that.
And just examples, and they're no longer on, but some of them come on with the idea of, you know, they start talking about the quarterly check and what they're going to get and this, and it's not. I mean, that's all they talk about. But I mean, those people tend to weed themselves out. But those are just some of the examples of the younger generation coming into it. Is what am I getting out of it now?
Immediate financial motives. And to say also in the volunteer incentive payment, they are not eligible for that, like a new member coming in, until they complete their initial training. So that's the incentive to get to that point, is complete your training. And so once the training is completed is when we start.
200 hours.
Yes.
Firefighter 1.
Yes. And they're allowed to, once they're coming online with their services, they're able to start accruing points.
We have TCDRS, and I was talking to one of the people, because I was getting my password, because I logged into the system. So, and I asked them, hey, just on average, how do y'all track how long it takes somebody to start checking into this? And they estimated year 16. Year 16, they start looking at for retirement. And that's past the time when they're gone. Yeah. People are, I mean, the younger generation doesn't even, it's not even a carrot to them anymore.
So maybe the carrot needs to change.
Yeah.
But I think Paul's trying to either add to it or change it to something else.
This information is a little dated, but this is what I had when I calculated for this year's reimbursement for Randall County. Of course, that's all based on fiscal year 18-19. But we had about 1,100 calls total, and 358 of those were county. So it's about a third and 2/3. And that's what we use to determine whether we're going to reimburse us still on that same fiscal year, whatever our operational costs were, they reimburse us.
The operational cost based on call type, or is it just call?
It's our total, everything that Department 300 incurred other than capital outlay, so like cost of trucks, but everything else is operational. Is part of that calculation.
But are you asking type of coal too, though? So they pay the same for a structure fire
Yeah,
that they do?
It's not broken
there's
down.
an accident.
Percentages.
Yeah, it's just operational percentage.
And that would include all of I-27, anywhere up and down 27, as far as you would go.
If you're not, our county contract area goes to the north of Rockville Road currently, south to Dallin Road. East, we go to Powder Canyon State Park, I guess the Armstrong County line in the park area. West, we go over to, where's the head facility at? Anyway, about halfway between here and Dumbarton. So that's our county contract area. Anything that we respond to the county outside of that area is considered mutual aid, and that's not subject to that reimbursement numbers. So, currently, what does a firefighter cost the city of Canyon? Salary, and this is, I believe, including the 5% availability of 5% increase after their probationary period of 6 months. Then their fringe benefit amount, some associated costs with hiring a firefighter. It takes about $3,500 to outfit them in their structural wildland PPE. Their uniforms, and uniforms that might seem a little high, but that we also include the wildland pants that, like I'm wearing right now, in that figure. Portable radios, $8,000. I never thought I'd see the day when we were paying $8,000 for a walkie-talkie for firefighters to have communications. But it's so important for each individual firefighter to have one assigned to them, because with the new technology they have, if they key up the radio and don't say anything, it shows on all walkie-talkie screens who's keying up. So that way we know where that transmission's coming from. It's a great communication system, but boy, it's expensive. Overtime, this is just averaging about 200 hours extra a year based on the base rate of a firefighter. Once again, our plan is with the overtime, as more are hired, we're going to be able to reduce that amount of callback and overtime that's needed for each firefighter.
And some of that expense you have for every volunteer also, correct?
Yes, equipment, $8,000 radio, that's per member, not just a paid firefighter, and all those PPE costs, that's per firefighter, whether they get a paycheck or not. Our future needs, our vision and goal.
I got a quick question.
Yes.
So, I'm 20 years old, and I want to be a fireman. Where does that process start to being full-time in this station? How does that work? I'm just curious.
Do you want to start off as a volunteer and end up as a full-time firefighter?
Yes.
Or just a guy off the street.
Or just say, yeah, I just want to, I need to go to Emerald College, take care of that, whatever. Where my question is likely going for you guys is, how many guys do you train and then Amarillo takes them because they pay more?
We've had we've lost lots of good firemen to other departments.
I didn't mean
whether it be
Amarillo, I'm just using
Amarillo
Amarillo.
or I've got several in the Metroplex.
Pantex.
Pantex. Yeah.
And not to say, we've lost a few of our full-time guys to that, but a lot of these we train as volunteers, and then they like it. And, we'd like to retain them, and they come work for us.
They go somewhere else to be a full-time firefighter.
It's hard to compete with Amarillo with Pantex.
Pantex is the very tough one to compete with. You don't understand their salaries. So, but there's even a training path that you can take coming in as a guy wanting to be a volunteer firefighter, and we can get you your paid firefighter certification through a couple of years through this training. If you're dedicated to it, and if that's the path you want to take, you will not have to go through a regional fire academy. We can get you there, but it's a longer process. The regional fire academy at Emerald College is the
fastest.
So once again, our goal down the road is to have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week staffing. When, what year? I don't know. It all depends on how we can accrue staff through the years. It's going to take 18 line staff to staff Station 1, the current fire station that we have over here. That'll be divided into 3 shifts, 6 full-time firefighters. on each shift. One of those 6 will be a shift lieutenant of that time. The 24/7 staffing, once again, we're going to be giving more opportunities for our volunteer members to come in. They'll be able to help staff how many hours that they're available, 7 days a week. I will have to let you know, our current facility, it's not adequate for 24/7 staffing with 6 guys. We could probably squeeze them in there, but I'm going to lose office space. I've moved Dan Root and Vince upstairs into our old dorm room for office space right now. It'd take them coming back out, and I don't know where I'm going to put them. So just let you know that. Something else we're going to have to look at down the road, gentlemen, is a satellite fire station. We are stretching that 5-mile maximum response route from the station, which ISO rates us heavily on. And we're getting very close to that at this moment.
Now, does that 5 miles just include the city, or does that include the county calls also?
If you live 5 miles, greater than 5 miles away from the fire station, and you're not within 1,000 foot of a fire hydrant, you're getting like a 9 rating or whatever ISO is determined. Satellite fire station is going to take additional staff. Probably not staffed as heavily as what we're talking about, 6 per shift. With those 6, that's kind of built in also that we could have swing people. If we did have a satellite station, we could cover, if we had full staffing at our downtown station, we could move one out to a satellite station if we need to. But that 6 really needs to be there to cover sick leave, vacation leave, sending guys out for training, whatever the case may be.
But 5 miles really, that's well outside our city limits then.
Yeah, well, right now, when they were doing the Spring Canyon addition, I stopped and right there at the north end, that's drive miles, right there at the.
That's how many?
That's
We're
drive
right-
miles.
we're right at 5 miles.
Not as the crow flies.
Road
that's
miles.
Drive miles.
Yeah.
Okay.
So once we build the roads into the north part of Spring Canyon, we might be pushing some limits. We're right now from the corner on VFW to the station, it's right at about 5 miles.
So we're getting very close to that. We're going to have to watch as we go along with that. Next slide. Of course, I understand, guys, personnel, they're not cheap. Some of the funding options out there through FEMA, there's something called a SAFER grant, and that's what precipitated this whole meeting today. The 2020 grants caught us by surprise. That's the funding that they're going through the process right now to approve applications for that. But the 2020 SAFER grants through FEMA, this year, this round that they'll be awarding in the fall, the first time in history covered 100% of wages and fringe benefits for new hires. Overtime costs are not reimbursable, and this is for a period of 36 months that they cover these, cover the salary and fringe benefits for, so a 3-year period. The next funding opportunity is going to be probably February, March 2022. And those awards will be released by early fall next year. So we're about 18 months away from that before the 2021 grants come through. Next slide. What will the 2021 grants cover? We don't know. We won't know until the notice of funding opportunity is released. Like I said, historically, April into May was the application time. So I was kind of watching for that to come up. And all of a sudden they hit us, and these were due March the 10th, I believe, was the deadline to get grant funding requests in, and it just was not enough time to address each one of y'all about it in the commission meeting and get that approval to apply for that grant. So that is a possibility.
It is a big decision.
Yes, it's huge. Up until this past grant period, historically, the SAFER grants funded on the first 2 years of reimbursement, 75% federal funds, 25% local funds. That means 25% out of the budget would have been paying for any new hires that would have been approved, if that had been approved. The final year, FEMA kind of flips that back around to 35% federal funds, 65% local funds, trying to get the municipality or county that hire these firefighters in the mode of assuming the full financial responsibility after the 3rd year, which goes 100% local.
It's been like that for a long time.
Yes.
A long time.
2020 kind of surprised us. One, they sent out the notice of funding opportunity, caught us off guard with the how early in the year it was, and it was surprising to see that they were 100%. What will 2021 hold? We don't know yet.
So if we were able to, if we decide we're gonna go ahead and hire the 6 and get that going for this next budget year, how would we pay for that? I've tried to project our property tax revenue based on, just on our tax base, so on valuation alone. Over the past 4 years, our property tax base, just on valuation, has been increasing at an average of about 5%, 3 to 5% overall. Some years higher, some years less. But if we projected that at 3% over the next 3 years, that would give us roughly 104 to 109,000 increase each year. So over that 3-year period, about 321,000 of increase, just based on, if we let property tax rate the same, that's just based on increase in valuation. And that really coincides with the increase that Joe showed earlier, the population, just increased home building primarily, and increase in existing home valuations just because of the strong economy. So if we were able to get the SAFER grant, and let's say it went back to the way it was before this 100% offering, because we just don't know. If we were able to get that, so the first year we'd be looking at our participation in that being 100,000. So that increase would cover our part of the SAFER grant for those first 2 years for sure. And then if we went to the 65% in the third year, that would be about 275,000. And this is based on 6 firefighters at that estimated cost for salary compensation. We'd be looking at about 275,000 in that year being our part. And then by the 4th year, we would be responsible for 100,000 or 100% of that. And so if we built in a 3% increase in compensation over that time, we'd be looking at our share being about 436,000, and that's just compensation. We would have those out-of-pocket costs up front for PPE and equipment, but this would be the compensation. So at some point, even with the increase in the valuation tax base, we'd be looking at needing to increase that tax rate a little bit to get up to that 436,000 at the end of the 4 years, once we got beyond the SAFER grant.
Just to sum all this up, y'all can read the quote there, but I think it's very appropriate to what we've been talking about. I'll try to let you know where we've been, what's happened through the years, where we are now, what our immediate needs are. And that, say immediate needs, and you can see we're asking for 6, but in the end, when we reach our 24/7 staffing and where we need to be at for one station, I would entertain any questions you have right now regarding this. Anything else about the fire department? Once again, I understand finding additional people, it's not cheap. It could be a challenge. But I'm here, Vince here, we're here to answer any questions you may have.
So when are you asking for the 6?
I'd love to have them right now.
But then we can't retroactive that grant.
No, grant-wise, you'd be looking at the application period next February into March before we could apply for that. And then with those grants being awarded towards the fall of 2022.
But I think that's the route Dennis and I would like to go, is to do the grant. We would say it would be stupid not to.
So we wouldn't actually be putting on firefighters, we'd be ready to roll the fall of 2022 then?
Yes.
Should the grant be
Should the grant be
These FEMA grants are very competitive also. I should have added that in. It's not a given by any means. The first round of FEMA grants are scored by a computer system. So if you make it through the first round, that means you go into the second round where human eye contact actually comes in and starts reading your grant application.
What are the what's the criteria for the grant? I mean, is it location of where you are, obviously?
They are looking for departments that are increasing full-time firefighter staffing. I would say, what I know about the SAFER grant, we're sitting in a pretty good situation to apply for one of those and hopefully get approved.
I do know, I've read some articles about the last one, and a lot of that, the funds for this last one, a lot of the criteria was those that got laid off because of the whole pandemic and everything. It's going to get those people back to work in the bigger cities, Detroit's, Cleveland's, places like that. They're going back in and helping fund those.
That was another thing with the 2020 grants. Yes, they are funding larger departments or departments that laid off staffing, whatever reason, as well. And that's a new award categories, bringing back in laid off firefighters. Never seen that before. Once again, what will it hold? What will they be looking for next year? You never know.
Joel, if your prediction of 3% evaluations increase is liberal, and that doesn't come true, could it put us in a bond rollback? Why in year 3?
I don't think rollback. We would just need to.
Well, it's going to add to that, though.
We would need to increase our tax rate to produce that same amount of revenue.
And this is holding the tax rate flat.
Yeah, I was just showing, if we didn't change the tax rate, if we didn't
Oh.
increase the tax rate, we're just dependent on tax and new
The value's
construction.
going up.
But
But
some of
they're
that
both the
rollback's
same.
in there,
They're
though,
the
you're
same.
right, because.
But that
because
makes
of
year
evaluation.
2024 real time.
Could, if we did it this way. It would take up all your additional income in theory. You wouldn't have the other additional income unless water rates or whatever other things increased income.
Which, I mean, from an elected official perspective, it doesn't bother me to have to go roll back for an important issue like that. Wouldn't bother me. I'm just curious if
What really throws us off, Cody, is the frozen rate. You know, we could actually increase in property values, but then we could also have an increase in people that hit the age of 65, and it wouldn't be an increase. So that really throws Joel and I off, and we do many assessments on that, and that's the hard part to predict on this. This is what y'all's trend has been, and so that's kind of why we started here. So ultimately, like, I want to go back to what Dennis said. You know, this rolled out really quickly past February and March. There was not enough time for us to bring this to you for as magnitude of the decision this was. And so Dennis and I's thought coming in here today is to put this seed in your mind and plant it. And so there is a need here. We would want to hold and do the SAFER grant this next year, this next coming calendar year in February or March, and do it that way. But we want y'all to ponder on this and think about that, moving that way, because this is a tax decision at the end of the day. So it shouldn't be a rush decision is where I go with you guys.
Oh, yeah, and that's using most of our revenue increases are using them up plus for the fire. You know, that doesn't include the salary increase. That doesn't include if we build a new police station, we have bonds. You know, there's a lot of the pieces to that.
Yes.
Or, you know, we have to do a satellite fire, you know, that may mean how much do we want to grow and all too, you know, if we've got to fund a, you know, if taking on an additional piece of development means we have to fund an additional fire station, I mean, that probably needs to go into that equation and all that.
Very good point, Gary. We agree.
And you also, you're asking us questions about Randall County and how much of that we get reimbursed. With them building their satellite station from, is it McCormick?
Yes.
That may change that ratio some.
But that doesn't count for our ISO 5 mile.
but it could reduce the number of calls that were going on for
Our
reimbursable.
income coming in, which is how much right now?
200. No, it's about the current year we're in right now is based on about 300,000.
And then we swap that with the dispatch. So Joel, ultimately, there's really, we pay them.
We pay $212,000 a year.
225.
$225,000 a year for dispatch service.
So that's fixing to not be a wash, is that what you're thinking, Joel?
Yeah, it's already not. I mean, well, it could be a wash. We're getting more back than what we're paying out.
Do you have any inclination at all, first of all, who negotiates the boundaries of that contract? Second of all, do you have any inclination of what they're gonna wanna take back, or are they wanting to?
I don't know, if they move a station closer to Canyon, I can see them coming down to Rockville with their response area.
Because that station's, it's gonna be south of McCormick.
I'm not for sure where they've decided. I know all that McCormick, Lair Road, 2219 area.
Yeah,
Is all
it's right
they
there.
looked at around I-27. I have not heard exactly where.
I think it's just south of the cemetery, it's in back what acres?
Okay.
Back acres.
Back acres area? Okay. So, if they put a station in, and that's a 24/7 staffed station, because I know that's where they're trying to
Wanting
move
to.
to. If they're staffed 24/7, why would they not come on down past Rockwell or, take in some of that area that they can get to?
Dr. King?
I see that staying, that's a joint response right now, where they send X number of people, we send X number of people on a rescue squad.
Would they take south of Canyon?
I just don't know what the plan is, change the leadership up there, I don't know what the current plan is.
It would be nice to have some of those answers and all from, what their intent is we're planning on what to do.
Does that change for you because I'm trying to be logical and think, if they are 24/7, can they get south quicker than we can?
When we're not staffed?
Well, based on right now.
I think while we're staffed, we've got.
You're about the same time?
Yes.
Because they're on I-27 south.
Yes. Once we get out and get on I-27, go south.
You're about the same time. So we don't know if they would want to take that.
I do not know.
If they did, would that change your plan?
Here, City of King is my plan. The Randall County response area, that contract area, we're there to help Randall County out, but we are the King Fire Department for the City of King. So, everything that I've pretty much presented today has been based on City of King and not
Canyon
anything with,
no,
yes.
We really
not
didn't
Randall
look,
County
yeah, we really
contract
didn't
area.
take that into consideration going into the Randall County response.
The thing it does change though is if they do that within 5 years, and you've got this piece, and say it's 450 to 500,000 with PPE and all, then you add another 150, potentially thousand or 200,000 to that for a budget number. So then that becomes that could be a $600,000-700,000 piece if we lose that Randall County family. So
Could be, yes.
could be, but it would be good to know their intents and where that's going, because that'd be a significant piece.
I suspect that will, I'd hate to, I don't know the answer to that. If we're actually it's costing us more to serve those calls than it is for what we get back in reimbursement. It'd be hard to figure that out, because you're looking at overtime.
The existing contract was dated October 1st, 2019, so it's probably going to get revisited.
The other thing is, if they, it's not, if they're not building, there's already an existing building there. When they start staffing that, it's gonna change your mutual aid too, the lessons on your mutual aid. Good. North at least.
Yes.
And maybe even west for that matter. Because that's kind of a dying station anyway.
And where is the new station?
It's over north of the McCormick area, on the west side of the highway, I think.
It's on the west side of the highway, just south of the cemetery.
West. Okay.
The little filling station right there.
Yeah.
There's a piece of property just to the north of that. Has a massive building on it.
the Randall County's been working really hard, and Dennis was a big part of that, of them growing that department. Because, you know, the population out in rural Randall County is just it's exploding, and so the county's really focused hard to try to catch up to that. Cody, I think you'd agree with that.
Oh, yeah, and their volunteer program is struggling too, and Dennis knows this, because when they ask for a volunteer, they're coming. Very few of them. Just getting to these stations is pretty stinking difficult. So I think the volunteer stuff has been a struggle for a lot of people.
But we didn't come with wanting a decision today, you guys. We just want to plant this seed here and now and start looking at it as we go forward. So our intent moving forward would be, you know, a decision probably made later this summer in the fall as we start moving forward, because we want to apply for the SAFER grant probably March. I think is probably where it's going to pop up again of next 2022.
And you'll need a commitment from us before that.
Yes.
It's my understanding, your approval to be able to apply for that grant.
That's correct. And so we're predicting, I mean, who knows, it may come in at 100% again like it did this last go around. I think we're all kind of crapshoot that right now, but typically it's been 75, 25, 35, 65. It was like that forever.
If we're talking about, back to the carrot part and all, to, you know, for the volunteer, what are the pieces? Sounds like, you know, and then over time, we talked about through the years, really trying to max, you know, what we could on retirement, you know, doing what we could there, and I think we, you know, for the cost of that, I think it's worth, you know, if there's more we need to do there to meet the max, I think we're about there too.
I think, you know, what y'all done for the volunteers in the city of Canyon, I would venture to say that we're on the very top end of the state in what is provided for the volunteer. You know, it's...
You can't get too close to the compensation too. You got to be far enough away from it, but not too close to it as well.
What do you mean?
For fair labor standards and like
Sort of treat them like an employee.
Our volunteer incentive program, there are some state statutes as well as, of course, FLSA statutes or rules that are pretty specific on what, I say specific, that's kind of vague in a way, on what you can compensate a volunteer for their time for. I know on the state level, is a certain percent of what a full-time firefighter would make. We cannot cross that line, or the Texas Commission on Fire Protection now use them as paid fire protection personnel, and it changes the certification program up a lot of things.
Are there any other benefits, and we talk about the camaraderie piece and the family piece and all, are there pieces that we could do there? And you know, I'm sitting thinking, I was wondering the other day, don't some of them, I know our policemen use the workout facilities over here, it's kind of in a little shed. Well, is there a way to do that where that's a nicer benefit, and you know, even expand that or something? Or are there things we can do, like, I don't know if it's a certain number of times to the pool with the family, or are there times that we get you know, 3 times a summer we have the evenings for the volunteer or the whole fire department? Or are there things like that we could do too, that maybe we could try to build those, if that's an important piece that we could try to build that?
That's where Dennis, I think Dennis is, that's his next focus. His big thing is he helped create the VIP program, and he told me he was going to try some new avenues on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and as far as the family component, especially the summertime coming up, of course, COVID last year just killed everything. But we're going to get back into the family evenings, try to have one in May, June, July, August. And like I said, whether it be that we're fortunate enough to get down at the CAP and have a family evening down at the CAP with the cookout and everything, something like that.
Certainly we can make that happen if we
Or as simple as we gather up down at the park somewhere and cook some burgers, and everybody just kind of hangs out and visits. That's a good time too. But it gets those families involved, and that's very important.
Are you guys still doing your convention?
Yes, it's gonna be the end of this month.
Here?
Here.
Okay. We'd like to participate in that. I mean, we could, that one year Happy, we cooked burgers, and the hose thing is really cool. I mean, I think that's something that, you know, a lot of people in Canyon don't know about it, so maybe it's on, hey, come root on our team as we compete in these things? Because it is really neat.
It kinda hit us quick this year. They let us know, in fact, it's kind of a.
Sure,
quick
sure,
deal.
sure.
And they had a meeting and we kinda put it together and yeah, it's back in Canyon this year.
Okay.
So I will get, you some information that you can talk to the
That's it.
president of that.
Like 10 days.
Yeah.
Do
The
y'all-
30th and the 1st.
Do y'all ever pay for firefighters to go to the regional fire academy?
Volunteer members or paid members?
Yep. And can you contract them after that?
Yeah, there was,
I know we tried that with police officers and it was a miserable failure, but.
the last one that was sponsored basically as an employee was when Chief Webb transferred over into the fire department back whenever that was.
93.
Yeah.
Could that be a carrot? Would you take applications for a?
Well, Cody, here's my personal story. You know, I got on as a volunteer in 2002 and went to work full-time in 2005. And I did that through the volunteer certification side of things. Once I got accredited and tested and did that, I could challenge the TCFP side of it. And that's how I got my full-time start, is I started on the volunteer side and through that process.
Right. I suspect that there are people out there that want to become a firefighter and just don't know how to get started. And so if you ran an ad and said, hey, we're going to sponsor somebody at the Regional Fire Academy, you just have to sign on Canyon Fire as a full-time firefighter for 2-3 years.
You know, with that being said, you know, I mean, if you look back at our hiring history, there's been no spot for, you know, no need for a full-time
Right.
person. We have some going through there now that some of our volunteers are going through the academy, and, you know, I think they would
Daniel
love to
did,
come
right?
back.
The recent hire?
Well, we have to create a position.
And start here,
We don't have
if there was a position. Yeah.
Our newest hire that, we hired back in October, just very quickly here. We hired back in October. He was, the one that we hired was very upfront with me that he had a pending application at Pantex, but he felt historically it was going to be a year and a half before anything was acted on it. 4 months later, he comes back up to us and said, Pantex has contacted me. They're in a pretty tough spot, I guess, with firefighters right now, so they're speeding through some applications. Anyway, we lost him to Pantex. Couldn't compete. So the firefighter that we have replaced him with is actually going to the academy right now, but he was already in the academy before we hired him.
He was one of our volunteers that was gonna go through, because they were not the fire general.
But we're not compensating, we didn't pay for his academy. The only thing I'm doing is allowing him to be on the clock during those academy hours, because now that he is a paid employee, it's required that he's gonna complete that academy. His job is dependent on it, so that's considered work hours for him now.
Any other thoughts, gentlemen? Let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll definitely come back to this topic in the next several months, but.
Thank you for your time.
We threw a lot at you. Does anybody want a copy of this PowerPoint?
I do.
Commissioner Lyons, if y'all want those reports, you know, the call breakdowns, just give me a shout, I can make it happen.
Let's take a break.
Thank you all,
guys.
appreciate it. And, yeah, I know we've got our challenges with growth and just dynamics of the society and all too, which, you know, I wish the volunteer piece wasn't a part of it. Just life in general, John and I were talking about that at Arbor Day. You know, you just wish I think that's a good piece where you've got a community that those folks, and you got folks in here that serve and do other things. That's just a good way for a community to be. And anyway, I don't know. You wish you could retain that part of community life. I understand. And maybe we can to a certain extent too.
Well,
Some of those thoughts and
The vision is a full combination department, so
We'll always, in my opinion, for the rest of my career, we'll always have a need for the volunteer to come in and help.
You know, I did
I
get
plan on
thinking,
sticking around for a little while.
Canyon, a veteran community, you know, it'd be really nice if you've got, more people working from home in Canyon, if you've got employers somehow that would allow those folks in to come volunteer too.
And we used one of those grants for up in the police department several years ago. If you remember, we hired 3 police officers, and
Right.
their salary was paid for 3%.
And that was,
Yeah.
yeah.
Same program.
Thanks, Joe.
Appreciate it.
You know what, I'll get you, Joe Cook's information.
Sorry?
He can
Close out.
on the board. They'll know more than what I know.
Got down to shape after breaking his leg and all, and he just worked out back pain and all, and I think he just walked 4 miles around the road. So, anyway, I'm not going this year, so I just got done kidding. Oh, my gosh.
Just hard, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm gonna have to get more guys to go backpacking. Got a jet. You know, what, that's what we, all of us in this room.
Yeah, hang on. Yes.
Is it in here?
Yes, sir.
We share it.
I have a help.
Finance information on the bonds. Yeah, those blue sheets. Yes, with the. Yes.
We're gonna do the fireman and police department calendar.
First two,
Fundraisers.
I should turn those into front and back. They're single
I'll
sided.
raise your money.
Well, that's.
Calendar's one.
Okay, I'll just stick on that one. I'll give them 2 or 3. That was good, Joe. Yeah, I thought that was very logical.
Well, they had good questions, very good questions.
I mean, would you be open to picking somebody up this fall?